Welcome to Neapolitan. Today we'll be looking at the so-called bulldozer of Swedish politics, Magdalena Andersson. Never heard of her? Then it's time to take notice. In fact, even if you already know who she is, you'll want to stick with us as we'll be taking a deep dive into Magdalena's history, how she rose to power, and the woman she is today. This video will be broken down into 3 unique sections, like Neapolitan Ice Cream, the vanilla, the who, what, where, and one of the folks that changed the world, chocolate, that flavor punch. Controversy and adversity make lives so interesting. And the strawberry, the lasting legacy and lick that all Neapolitan lives come with. If you're interested in other videos like this, or different in-depth looks at essential people throughout history, then make sure you're subscribed to the channel with post notifications on, so you never miss a single one. Without further ado, let's get into it. Vanilla. Magdalena Andersson was born on January 23, 1967 in Uppsala, Sweden. An only child, her father Göran was a lecturer in statistics at the local university, while her mother, Brigitta, was also a teacher. I guess there's no danger of Magdalena not finishing her homework while growing up in that household. An academically gifted student indeed, Magdalena attended the Cathedral School in Uppsala, graduating in 1987 with the top grades in all but one of her classes. She excelled in another area too, swimming. As a youth, Andersson won gold at the Swedish National Junior Championships twice, in the breaststroke category. When she was 14 years old, she finished 12th in the National Women's Championship. Outside of the pool, Magdalena went on to earn a degree in business administration and economics from the Stockholm School of Economics in 1992. While studying there, she met her future husband, a fellow economist by the name of Richard Freiberg. They now have a son and daughter together, and Richard returned to teach at their alma mater. Magdalena grew interested in politics at an early age, becoming a member of the Youth League for the Swedish Social Democratic Party in 1983, when Maggie was just 16. She was elected to the position of chairperson for the Uppsala branch of the organization 4 years later. After obtaining her degree, Andersson continued to study for a PhD in economics and spent time at the Institute for Advanced Studies in Vienna in 1994, as well as at Harvard University in 1995. However, Magdalena opted not to finish her studies when she was offered a political advisor position in 1996. She gladly took the role which placed her in the office of Social Democrat Prime Minister of Sweden, Göran Persson. With her foot now firmly in the political door, Andersson gained a wealth of experience working in numerous roles, including Director of Planning from 1998 to 2004, State Secretary for the Minister of Finance from 2004 to 2006, Domestic Policy Advisor for Social Democratic leader Mona Sahlin between 2007 and 2009, Deputy Director General of the Swedish Tax Agency from 2009 to 2012, and then Economic Policy Spokesperson for the Social Democrats until 2014. When the Social Democrats won the 2014 Swedish general election, Magdalena Andersson became the Minister of Finance, a position she held throughout Prime Minister Stefan Löfven's time in office. As Minister of Finance, Andersson was generally seen to be extremely competent and was well known for her slogan, "Sweden can do better." Not the most imaginative slogan ever, but I guess it's to the point. And Sweden did do better under Andersson's guidance, as the nation's GDP, or gross domestic product, grew by more than 2% during her 7-year tenure. Inflation was kept low and unemployment in the country fell from 7.9% when she started to 6.3% 4 years later. Her main issue involved making budget policies that persistently failed to win support in the Riksdag, Sweden's parliament. Take note, as this is something that would play a huge role in one of Magdalena's defining moments to come. For now, though, Andersson's respect as an economist was growing, and in 2020 the Policy Advisory Committee of the International Monetary Fund, IMF, chose Andersson as its chairperson, making her the first woman to hold that post. When support for far-right policies in Sweden boomed in response to an influx of immigrants in Europe, Prime Minister Löfven lost a vote of confidence in 2018. In the years that followed, failure to get approval for his budget and an inability to cater to the liberal and left-wing parties led to Löfven's resignation as PM in November 2021. Waiting in the wings was none other than his successor, Magdalena Andersson, whom it was hoped could rally support for the 2022 general election. Before filling in as Prime Minister, Andersson had been elected leader of the Swedish Social Democratic Party on the 4th of November 2021, becoming the party's second female leader after Mona Sahlin. Now she had become Sweden's first ever female prime minister, despite not receiving a majority of yes votes, because under the country's principles of negative parliamentarianism, too many people abstained from voting and did not vote against her in order to prevent her being elected. I mean, a win's a win, right? Chocolate. The fact that Magdalena Andersson is the first female Swedish prime minister doesn't mean that the Scandinavian country is misogynistic. In fact, Sweden is somewhat of a pioneer when it comes to female representation in politics, and women have been long present in Swedish government and elected offices. However, breaking the final barrier for the top position did take longer than it had for many neighboring countries. Still, a promising chapter in Sweden's political history had begun. That was until just a short time later, when Magdalena Andersson stunned everyone by resigning just 7 hours after taking office. Why? Well, remember the budget difficulties we mentioned earlier? After learning that the Riksdag had rejected her preferred budget and passed one put forward by the opposition instead, Andersson quit, saying, "I don't want to lead a government whose legitimacy will be questioned." It's actually a little bit more nuanced than that. You see, the opposition budget gained the support of the right-wing populist party, Sweden Democrats. This caused Sweden's Green Party to pull out of the ruling coalition because they didn't want to be bound to the right-wing backed budget. Swedish convention at the time dictated that a prime minister should resign if a party leaves their coalition. So Andersson left but notified the government speaker that she would prefer a single-party social democratic government. 5 days later, Magdalena Andersson was voted back into office as prime minister, only just though receiving 101 votes of approval and 173 votes against her, too short of what was needed to stop her getting back in. 75 voters abstained. Andersson was now back in power, and this time as the head of a single-party minority government. On November 30th, 2021, Sweden's King Carl XVI Gustaf officially announced Andersson and her administration. Andersson is Sweden's first female head of government since Queen Ulrika Eleonora abdicated in 1720. After a tumultuous start, it's no wonder that Magdalena has gained a reputation as the bulldozer in political circles. It was also the nickname given to her in a television profile. A forceful presence and direct, blunt statements tend to rub many people in Sweden the wrong way. Anders Lindberg, political editor at Aftonbladet, an independent social democratic newspaper, said of Magdalena, "People even say they are scared of her, which is kind of funny. These elite political scientists or professors of economics saying they are afraid of her." The editor, like many other people, have drawn comparisons between Andersson and Angela Merkel of Germany, saying that her way of arguing is not always clear, but that she ends up winning the argument because no one else can really answer because she masters all the details. As for what the bulldozer herself thinks, the 54-year-old mother of two had described herself as simply a nice, hard-working woman who likes to be in charge. In her first speech as leader of the Social Democratic Party, Andersson said that if migrants to Sweden wanted to receive welfare, they must learn to speak Swedish, work and graduate from high school. She also stipulated that migrant men must allow female relatives to work. Magdalena has expressed regret over the government's approval of 160,000 asylum seekers in 2015 to help with the European migrant crisis, believing that Sweden didn't have enough housing or employment to integrate them. Ironically, in January 2022, Swedish police arrested a cleaning assistant in Andersson's private residence because the woman, who was from Nicaragua, had overstayed. Her residence permit had expired. In response to the incident, a number of opposing politicians at the time cited concerns over the prime minister's lack of security. In June, Magdalena was threatening resignation again, not only for herself but the entire government. This was after the Sweden Democrats had proposed a confidence vote against Justice Minister Morgan Johansson, who they alleged had failed to stem the flow of gang violence and recruitment in the country. Andersson came out in defense of Johansson, stating that In Sweden, we have a collective decision-making in the government. If you dismiss a minister because of political decisions, then you dismiss the entire government. It goes without saying. Thankfully for the Prime Minister and her office, the Riksdag ultimately voted against the motion for a vote of no confidence. Strawberry. Like any good politician, Magdalena Andersson has laid out her political objectives for the future of her country. One of her priorities is to take back democratic control of schools, healthcare, and elderly care, leading Sweden away from privatization of the welfare sector. Climate change is also at the top of her agenda, expressing a desire for Sweden to be a world leader and an example to all in its approach to tackling global warming and other environmental issues. Completing her top 3 objectives is putting an end to the segregation of immigrant communities, thereby hopefully ending the growing number of shootings and bombings that have occurred in Sweden, many of which can be tied to gang violence in low-income neighborhoods with high immigrant populations. In terms of international relations, Andersson was instrumental in Sweden joining the Frugal Four, an alliance made up of Austria, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Sweden, who called for fiscal restraint during the pandemic and lobbied for a more restrained COVID-19 recovery plan in Europe. COVID measures in Sweden as of December 2021 included the expansion of remote working, an option made available to employers, social distancing in public spaces, limited restaurant visitors, and mask wearing on public transport. Andersson has repeatedly emphasized the importance of vaccinations and advised people to take a break from hugging. When asked by the press if these measures affected her own Christmas celebrations or other plans, Andersson agreed that they would and revealed that she had already canceled a scheduled visit to Norway. However, the measures didn't prevent Andersson herself from contracting COVID in January 2022, when she tested positive and began working from home. She was reportedly in good shape, though, and made a full recovery. According to Bloomberg's COVID resilience ranking, which rates the best and worst places to be as the world enters its next COVID phase, Sweden ranked 20th in the world as of June 2022. The nation was actually the biggest faller on the list, having dropped 11 places since the previous month of May. Sweden came in 10th in universal healthcare coverage and 4th in the Human Development Index, a figure based on life expectancy, access to education, and income per capita. Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 forced Sweden to re-evaluate its long-held position of neutrality. So much so that in May, the policy was reversed entirely, and the Swedish government backed the country's application to become a member of NATO. Sweden, alongside Finland, has worked with NATO for decades, but has not been an official member of the alliance. However, Russia's actions have enforced the need for unity, and the two countries' acceptance of membership is a huge deal. In June, Reuters reported that Sweden will provide Ukraine with more economic aid and military equipment, including anti-ship missiles, rifles, and anti-tank weapons, more so than they have already supplied. Finance Minister Mikael Damberg and Defense Minister Peter Hultqvist confirmed that the proposals that are submitted to Parliament mean that allocated funds for the central government budget will increase by 1 billion Swedish krona in 2022, which is about 100 million additional US dollars worth. In solidarity with Ukraine and as part of the international response to Russia's actions, the Swedish government sees a continuing need to support Ukraine, said a government announcement. Military aid destined for Ukraine from Sweden includes 5,000 anti-tank weapons, helmets, and body armor, as well as an additional 5,000 anti-tank weapons in later months. Andersson has always identified with her political party's left-wing faction, but in the eyes of some analysts, she has taken a pragmatic approach to its shift toward the center in recent years. With such a measured approach, it might be surprising, therefore, to learn that away from all the politics, Magdalena Andersson is a big fan of the heavy metal band System of a Down. She also enjoys hiking, kayaking, and mountaineering, referring to herself and her family as outdoors people. If you enjoyed this video, let us know by leaving a like. Tell us in the comments if there's anything you think we missed or who you'd like to see us cover in the future. For more fascinating insights into historical figures like this one, check out the other episodes on our channel. Until next time, this has been Neapolitan, and we'll see you around.